All right. Good afternoon. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, this is The Truth is Still Straight. It's your co host on the scene with Jonathan St. James. And you have Jim on the lowest portion of your screen. And then you have Donnie St. James on the upper left. Unless you're hanging upside down, then it's all in different order. How are you folks doing?
All right, yourself?
Pretty good. Donnie?
Doing all right, relaxing, the normal.
Yeah, and since I didn't get a chance to say happy birthday, your birthday passed recently, so I just wanted to give you a shout out for that.
Thank you.
I heard you amassed a small fortune for your birthday.
It never feels like it.
Yeah. I heard you found some relatives who were contributing to your birthday.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I had a chance to Donnie, Jim, and myself. We went out to eat for his birthday and enjoyed ourselves. Well, I know I enjoyed myself with a porterhouse steak. I love steak.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, anywhere I go, I eat pasta, so I was satisfied.
It was nice. It was. It was.
All right. So what else is going on? Let's see. I guess we finished. Derek Jackson is over finally. But I did want to just say something weird that we didn't talk about last week on the show that I kind of wanted to talk about today, which was weird. For those of you who are keeping track of what's going on in that family, well, he went on with his wife and they had a discussion about what he did somewhat. It was a weird, I think we talked about that on the last episode, but what we didn't talk about was after he made that video, he made a reaction video to his video, which was weird. So he's listening to his video and then he's saying, oh, he was referring to himself in the third person and he was referring to her as if she was like not even his wife, the guy or something weird like that. I can't remember exactly how, but it was just weird to me. I'm like, please, guy, just go disappear somewhere. Go live on Kanye West Ranch or something, because he's just all over the place with his. He just won't give it up. He just refuses to let go of the situation. But it seems to have died down since then. But I just wanted to talk about that. That was very bizarre. So there you go, folks. That's probably going to be the end of the Derek Jackson saga for us, unless something happens, like so he gets launched to outer space or something like that. Then maybe we'll talk about that. But what's going on? Well, DMX, that's a serious thing there. He overdosed, I believe. What was that? Friday night, and then he was in the hospital. They said he was slightly improving. They don't know what the extent of the overdose was. He may have brain damage. Of course, I heard vegetative state, but it remains to be seen. Anything's possible. So I definitely, my thoughts go out to DMX, one of my favorite rappers historically. And I just hope that he turns out okay. All right. So let's get into this topic for today. And the topic for today's conversation is going to be one, and then the second part to it, which is going to be emotional vampires. So I want to start off from there. Once again, that topic for today's discussion is going to be emotional vampires. And within that discussion is going to be who's normal. Now, okay, so let me just start off with the disclaimer in terms of what we talk about who's normal. So in terms of relationships, not necessarily life, because that's a whole big category to get into the discussion of. But the main topic that I'm talking about in terms of emotional vampires and who's normal, meaning normal when it comes to relationships. And the first thing that I want to say is pretty much no one is normal. Let's just be honest there. And because we all have a myriad of issues that we bring when we meet people. And the important thing about relationships, and I'll get into this later, is growing up. Last week we talked about Toys R Us kids, who's really grown, who's really mature in relationships. So this is sort of a partner to that discussion in terms of, well, who's normal? So let's talk about emotional vampires and who are those. So Jim, since that is technically your topic, so I figured you should probably lead this discussion here. So do you need like a little prayer? Do you need like a little Aram Yorenge Kyo? Do you need something before you lead into the discussion? Because you did sort of name the topic, Adam.
Yeah, I did name the topic. No, I don't need a lead in with things though. Um, Emotional vampire was just a term I made up because I feel that some relationships, people feed off of the emotions and energies that people bring in. Most of the time when people are coming with a positive mindset or something like that, people do feed off of it. People do also feed off of negativity as well, and they give off in return. So I quote my said emotional vampires, just that they keep sucking away all whatever that you're giving off, and they're usually just giving off like nothing or something else that they entirely. And I didn't know it was gonna be a discussion this big, but it was just like a phrase for me to make a point of what you're giving off in a relationship in terms of support, love, attention, things like that. People are not giving back, but they're gladly taking. They gladly will take it, but they don't know how to give back. They don't realize not giving back, or they don't want to give back that same type of emotion or things like that. So I made a term of emotional vampire because vampires just, the main thing with vampires is that they just suck blood and they use it to keep their youth. They use it to stay strong and do whatever, and they don't offer anything. It was just that type of a phrase that people's emotional selfishness towards their partner. And I have been a victim of this plenty of times. You try to sometimes just try to be positive, or you try to move in a different direction, and some individuals take advantage of it and think that it's okay that I do a repeated action over again, or it's okay that I keep taking from you, when it's not really that. It's just that the level of maturity in a relationship is that if you are following, or if you lead by example and you follow. So people try to give the best example that they can, or they try to give the best example they can in a relationship that will allow the next person to follow and say, okay, well, it's okay to do this, it's okay to do that, and then when you give off that type of emotion that's not okay, then people should say, okay, it's not okay to do that, it's not okay to do this. But in this term of where it is, individuals today don't go by those type of cues. It's just what, eventually what's just what they want. And that's what it is. It's just based upon the individual's needs and stuff like that, or, what they think they may need or what they think they may want. It might not even be what they need or want, but they just think that in that determinant, that's what they want to get. And they just keep taking and taking and give nothing. They just think that their presence alone in a relationship is just good enough. And I don't even see a contribution, not even monetary. It's not even that. It's just what you emotionally bring to the relationship, your attitude, your past experiences, things like that. It's this has no monetary value. This has no type of tangible, I should say, real tangible value. It's something that you feel, and it's something that you give off, feel and give off, and it should be a symbiotic relationship that you give off, you accept what you give off to the other person, instead of you have to give back what you take. And for most of the time I've been in certain relationships, that's not been the case. It's just like, oh, that's just your nature, that's just your, that's just how you are, and I should be okay in doing that and me receiving nothing in return, or minimal nothing. I've had experiences as, oh, well, isn't me being with you good enough? And I just get taken aback because that's not really what that is, or that's not really what I was about. And then from that, I go in, I go in depth and ask them, what do you think this is? How do you feel about this and that? Like, I try to get to the bottom of why they're thinking like that, or what made them come to that conclusion. And maybe I probably gave off something wrong, or I misinterpret something. I try to make sure that things don't get, and didn't make things get lost too much in translation. Because
now, are you trying to finish the show in 10 minutes? Because we got to get a little discussion in here, dude.
Well, no, my experience. So
okay.
My experience.
Can we jump in there? Can we like start something here? All right. I need to get a little cipher going on here because, bro, you giving out the whole completion, so we won't be able to talk about anything.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Come on, man. Now I know how Marley Marl felt in the symphony when he's like, you ate it all up. You took away.
Most people won't get that reference.
No, they won't. They won't. Yeah, go on. I think it's the symphony, Marley Marl and the Juice Crew. Yeah, he was talking about they ate up all the time in the song.
Yeah.
He tore that microphone up. All right, so I kind of wanted to bring. You said a whole lot there, so I kind of wanted to bring it back to the beginning of the discussion at the point of where you said about the emotional vampire. So I want to kind of take it like in little steps, because I think you did a great narrative on how you came up with the terminology, and well defined, because I mean, I don't really have to say anything on top of that. But what I want to do is kind of go through some of the aspects of emotional vampires, and I think that's important. So I'm going to start it off based on what you said, and I want to give some notions of an emotional vampire. And I would definitely use that there people who are insecure. So I'm going to start off with insecurity. So people who are insecure, and so what they do is they will argue with you to get validation or to get reassurance that they are okay in this relationship. So I want to start off with that, because that is such a big thing in relationships, where people, they'll get into a relationship with someone and they're not sure of how they're performing in the relationship. So there'll be arguments, and then there'll be this whining and bickering. Oh, you don't spend enough time, or why are you always out? And then it's like a whole big argument about just stuff, in general. And it seems to be constant, and there's a constant need for reassurance in that relationship. That's so I want to start off with there, and maybe we can talk about some of the experiences there. I'll give you a perfect example. I remember I was many years ago, no time recent, I was in a relationship, and that was like always the issue. It was like, oh, do you like somebody else? Starting an argument about that because I was working, and I was, back in the day, I was working 6 days a week and working from 9 a.m. to 10, 11 p.m. And then on the weekend, I think I was working from like 9 to 4 or something like that. But anyway, I was working a lot. The only day I really had off was like on Sunday. So, I remember I was dating someone at the time, and then she was like, oh, you're always working. You got to come here, and, you got to spend more time, and you got to do this and you got to do that. But the woman, no, cell phones were really just coming out. A lot of people didn't have cell phones. So you can call me right at my desk. I'm there picking up the phone all day long. So it's not like I was out in the street. So the woman was insecure, had a problem, always starting arguments. And then like you had to show the love through the arguing. So it's like, oh, this is how you show your arguing. So it was a process. So it was like not sure, arguing, and then this whole big blowout, and then it's like, oh, we got to make up now. So it was always in that direction. So it's like, okay, first you are insecure because you don't know, you feel like I'm cheating or whatever you think it is that I'm doing out in the street. So the insecurity leads to the arguing, which has you looking for validation in the relationship, me having to reassure you that there's nothing wrong, that I love you, I care about you, that I'm about you. And then this argument, because now, many people think arguing is about love. Oh, yeah, we get into argument, and then now you got to make up at the end of the arguing, because you know what happens when people make up, they do things after the argument is over. It rhymes with Rex. I'll just say that. So that's a whole process. And I don't know about you, but that is extremely draining to me to have to constantly go through that. But there's some people who do that. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Donnie. And then I guess, Jim, you'll hit back at it. So Donnie, what do you think about that? Have you had any experiences similar to that? Or do you have one close or different, but along the lines of that?
Sure. I suppose. Yes, I do. My own experience with the insecure emotional vampire would have to be. There's more than one, actually. A quick one not one that I encountered, but someone I know is like this. You mentioned about fights, and using that as a tool. I know I've even met someone who's just enjoyed fights, and that gave them pleasure, even though that would never be a positive experience for the other person. So they would just push fights because that's what she liked. And then once she got what she wanted out of it, she just kind of carried on with her day and was able to move on quickly. I would say my own experience, though, how it went was, and I might have told you about this in the past, but essentially it would be like an argument would happen, a conclusion would be met, and then now I have to spend almost the same amount of time cheering that person up. I had to console her as if I didn't also go through the same emotions just a moment ago. So it felt like even if I quote unquote won the argument, even though that's of course not how you're supposed to look at arguments.
Right.
If I won the argument, I would still then have to be the one to be the bigger person, and put my feelings aside and reassure the other person because they now feel away. And that's that's obviously toxic. It's not a worthwhile situation because you then lose the opportunity to process your own emotions when you're too busy having to keep someone else's in check.
Yeah, I agree with that. So Jim, we're back to you. So now that we sort of had the definition and how emotional vampire was born. So I brought up one aspect that I felt, in my definition of emotional vampire. So can my definition fit in to your child? I mean, is that a trait of an emotional vampire? And if so, what are your experiences if that matches what your definition of emotional vampire is?
Yes, that's one of them. Insecurity is definitely one of them. Constant reinsurance, you're giving off this energy and they're just taking it. And like what Donnie said, that's okay. You go about her day. But, the reverse is not happening. It's not reciprocated. She, no apologies, no nothing. It's just a validation of, everything's going to be okay. And you don't, I didn't get nothing out of comforting that girl. He didn't get a chance to process anything himself because he's busy trying to calm down their situation, and that's what they were used to. And it's just that you feel empty because I judging from Donnie, he can't pass it. I think sometimes he probably felt empty and drained from all that, and it's you can't. Constant reassurance is a hard thing to do or to even put up with. And no matter how hard you try, if the person doesn't feel that way and you trying to tell them something different, they just constantly drain you, and it's unnecessary. So yes, that definitely fits in with what emotional vampire is, because she's using the emotion to give off a vibe, and then you drain someone of their reassurance or whatever, the positivity, and you just take it, but you don't give nothing in return. It's just you just take it. and it just constantly sucking motion. It's not just once it happens. It could be, as John said, be daily, weekly, weekly. I won't say monthly. It'll just have to be like, every, couple times a week, or at most weekly, but it's a constant reoccurring theme. And yeah, I definitely do agree with that. One aspect of it. Another one is, some people have parental issues, and they bring that into the relationship, and they're not looking for a relationship type, they're looking for more of a parental figure, and that drains the person, because you shouldn't have to, when you're at a certain age or a certain level, you shouldn't have to tell a person what to do, how to act in relationships. And I think some things you should be readily equipped. And if you have to keep teaching someone how to do something, that becomes very tiring in itself. I'm not sure if Donnie or yourself have went through that, but I went through a person who had daddy issues, we'll call it that, since that's the normal term. And I'm not equipped for that, because I myself do not have a father. So how am I going to lead you if I didn't have a father either? So that became very draining emotionally. And I think that was my worst experience with an emotional vampire. That was my worst experience.
Yeah, so that's a good one. I want to kind of jump on top of the parental conversation that you just had. So that is a big one. I'd say that's a big one, probably as big as the insecurities and the arguing that people have when they seek validation from the person constantly, because they just can't seek a level of comfort within themselves that they can function in the relationship. And I think that's what it boils down to. With the parenting, that's we've just recently talked about that a couple of weeks ago in terms of parents just don't understand. And you have people not only who didn't, because along with not having a parent there is parents that are there but are absentee. And I know a lot of people who have had parents right next to them growing up the whole way, but the parent wasn't involved in their lives at all. So basically they woke up in the morning. It's like, hi, dad, hi, mom, went on their way. And that was pretty much the level of involvement of the parent. They would make them dinner. They'd buy them clothes for school, they'd take them out on trips, but there was never really any engagement between the parents and that child. And I know many of people that I know who have experienced this, that they've had both parents in the house, in the home, and didn't have a parent there raising them, rearing them, explaining to them how to navigate through life. And when they get into relationships, now they're seeking the attention from the person that they didn't get from the parent. And that's a problem too, because who wants to raise a grown child? Like, who wants to raise if you're a teenager, who wants an adolescent child for a mate, a boyfriend or a girlfriend? And as a man, who wants a grown woman or a grown man and raise them like a child? And that happens so many times, that because they don't have the guidance in functioning as an adult, that they basically, whatever they learned as a kid is where they kind of function at as an adult. And it's weird because you can see people are 30 years old and they act like they're 15, or they're 40 or 50 years old and they act like they're 15 or 16, that they're still in high school, because that may have been as far as they've learned. So if you've learned up until 15 and you've learned nothing since 15, you're going to be behind the game in terms of growing. And there's so many people, you can see them. And I know, Donnie, I know you know Jim as well as myself, because we all know the same people, more or less. And we see how some of those people, I won't name them on here, but we know them, that they're very immature and they're 40 years old and they're 30 and they act like big babies. They say silly things and they ask you craziness. I remember one time a grown person asked me, was she annoying? And I was like, yeah, you're annoying. Yeah. And then got her feelings hurt. I'm like, you asked me, I didn't want to lie to you. I didn't want to tell you you're not, because you really are. Donnie, you know who I'm talking about. And Jim, you definitely know who I'm talking about. Somebody that you went to high school with, name, something with a K and last name A at the last of her name. And, something, so we were out eating one day and she spoke across the table and said, do you think I'm annoying? And I was like, absolutely yes. And got her feelings hurt. And she was astounded that I said that to her. But here's the thing. She's a 40-something-year-old woman, a high school graduate, a college graduate, I think on a couple of occasions, and behaves like a high school teenager. And that's why I say when you have missing parents, even sometimes they're there, but they're just absentee. They don't tell you how to become an adult. And that's why we did the episode recently of Parents Just Don't Understand, because we're trying to get people to understand if you have children and if you are in that experience yourself, that this, you got to kind of look at yourself and you got to help yourself remove your mentality from that predicament. So Donnie, I kind of went on there because I was just feeling this spirit moving over me about thinking about that whole setup there. And I know you know exactly what I'm talking about, so I'll let you get in on the ground floor over here.
Sure. Actually, do you mind if I also throw in a type of emotional vampire too?
Yeah. Is it different than what I just said? Do you have nothing to speak on what I just said? Because if you have something new with them, we can just move over to that. And Jim, if you wanted to go back, we can go back, or you can go whatever direction. Okay, so go ahead, Donnie.
It's a new thing because I would have mentioned the same thing you did, maybe a little less directly. But yeah, what I was going to mention, because I've specifically encountered these two types a lot, and they're a little they're kind of similar. This one kind of emotional vampire I've noticed is like the victim, right? Like that person who always has something tragic happening and they only come to you to get advice or vent about that thing. And obviously that's draining because they're not coming to you for when things are good. They're not coming just to hang out or to hear you out. They're coming because they need some reassurance that they know that you would be able to provide, because maybe they know you're equipped to handle something or whatever else. That's a big one. And also in the same kind of area, you also have these people who, I don't know, if you want to call them the talkers or whatever. They're these people who they use you as a soundboard only. Like they just like whenever they have an idea, something they're trying to think of or go through or whatever, they don't ever let you talk. It's all about whatever's going on with them. Yes. I guess you just help them organize their thoughts, and they don't really care about whatever's coming back out from you. Those two are big ones that I've noticed. I just want to throw those in real quick.
You're definitely making me reflect right now, because as you're saying these things, I mean, not necessarily in romantic relationships, but I definitely know those types that I've known them a very long time. And the conversation, it's funny because you could be going through something and you're like, hey, listen, I want to tell you what's going on with me. And about 2 seconds after you finish speaking, they go into an hour of whatever there's going on with them. And you're like, wait a minute here. I just called you to talk. And instead of kind of responding to what I'm saying, you go into this whole thing about yourself. All of a sudden, it's almost as if I never called and said anything to you. And it's amazing. So I can definitely understand what you're saying in regards to that. And in a relationship, that can be very destructive, because you need to be with someone that you can kind of let them know what you're going through. They can kind of support you and encourage you. And then they can do this. You can do the same in kind. But if it's just the street only goes one way, that can be very frustrating, because what do you do? Who do you go to? If you can't go to your girlfriend or your wife or your husband or your boyfriend, fiance, whatever, who are you going to if you can't go to that person? So, all right, Jim, I'm going to toss it over.
Real quick.
Wait,
Real quick. I just wanted to throw another
note.
note.
Tape. Go ahead.
And just practically speaking, that type of situation is incredibly bad for you, just because if all you get from the person who is your significant other, or even if it's like your best friend or someone, if all you get from them is just a wall of negativity all the time, you're not going to want to be with that person, because that's all you associate with them is just negativity. So that's just a big strain on any relationship.
That's certainly true. Absolutely. All right, Jim.
I guess I'll probably just do the whole shebang for Donnie's perspective and things like that. The talkative one I have definitely been a victim. I won't say a victim. A recipient of running into. And like what you said, Jonathan, it doesn't have to be a relationship. It could just be a regular friendship too at times. I classify them as, people who need a sounding board and people who just like to hear themselves speak. That's my little subsections of those of the talkers. Like what Donnie said, they don't necessarily need feedback, but they're just like taking up your energy and your time. And I guess that's why I always joke with people. I charge $100 an hour. When can I talk to you? Because I know where it's going. And it's like, I'm not even a qualified, therapist or psychiatrist for you to be a sounding board on, but, it's very draining. It's very draining because, they're coming, out of that. Sometimes I feel, I try to give them the benefit of doubt to come out of me of respect, or they value something from me. But then it's just like, just them talking. It's like, all right, that's it. And then the second part from what Donnie said was they talk to you, but what was it?
It was that victim, the one that always has something happening.
Yes, something's always wrong. And the worst part is that don't counter them, because I had the mistake of countering them. I'm like, I told them, if I made an example when the common denominator was not the people but the person, and then they're like, oh, what do you mean? Like they get all defensive and stuff like that. And I tell them, well, the common person in that situation is only one common thing, and they'd be like, oh, what is it? Like you. And I was like, what? That's not true. I was like, who's getting into situations all the time? I don't hear your friends, get into those situations, but it's. Like I said, when they run something by you and they're looking for feedback, 90% of the time with me, you're going to get truthful feedback. I should say 90%, but a majority of the time you get truthful feedback because, I thought that's what you were expecting, And for me, I can't, that's more straining to validate something that I know is not true. And people expect you to do that. And that is very draining, because you cannot be honest. You got to put on a front. Putting on a front is very, very stressful. And it's a lot easier on Instagram and Facebook. You got green screen, but for a person-to-person interaction, it's very stressful. And it's very, very hard to do, especially if you have the best interest for this person, if you're not trying to manipulate them, if you're not trying to do those type of things. You don't want to see people self-destruct, and that is very difficult to do. For your experiences, Jonathan, on the I remember you said it's High School Musical mentality from the last episode when you said people who emotionally has not left that phase.
Yes.
I totally agree with you on that. I realized this about people, and this is one of the things that I realized when people haven't seen each other for a long time. People leave you where they best remember you. So if you haven't seen a person for a long time, If you went to high school together, that's their default. They'll go back to that default because that's when they first met you. That's when they feel like they first knew you better. Most people don't have an adult type of feedback in relationships and friendships. Only in some working environments does that, adult interaction really happen until, the familiarity sets in. But aside from that, it is somewhat of an issue because people's experiences during that time change, people's mentality change, situations change economically, financially, marriage, location-wise. A lot of things change, and some people realize that they change, but sometimes they don't go along with the changes, even if they initiated it. And emotionally, they can't process, or they weren't really ready for those changes. They just see it as a part of life that they see around them. But for them to process it, I don't believe they have. And they just default back to that time where things were a lot simpler. They were less decisions had to be made. There was little, I won't say no repercussions or consequences, but there was little consequences of some of the decisions that they've made. And, sometimes individuals default back to that because, it was just, I won't say they were free, but it was just minimal risk and plenty of reward. That's how they saw it. And I have come across a lot of people like that, friendship-wise and relationship-wise. And it's hard to communicate and to emotionally get on the same level with certain people because, one, you can't bring them up to your level because they're still stuck where they are. So it's like you can't bring them up and you refuse to go down to their level. So what do you do in those cases? And it's very hard. And in relationship-wise, it's really, really hard because, your feelings will get in the way of how you feel about them on a maturity level. And it's hard to come to terms. It's not a delicate balance. It's a balance that no one should try to maintain. And it just drains you. It's just another emotion that drains you, and just like, you just feel tired all the time, just interacting with them.
So I wanted to add something there. I wanted to talk about the unaccountable people, because to me that is another emotional vampire. And those are people who are never responsible for anything that they do. So you'll have someone, they'll do something wrong and it'll be everyone's fault but themselves. And they'll say something like, well, you shouldn't have did this, or you shouldn't have did that, or, oh, because you did this, or it's never, they are never accountable for their actions. And it doesn't matter what it is. You could have just woke up and they could have stuck their foot out and tripped you. And they'll say, well, you shouldn't have walked by my foot. Instead of saying, oh, you know what, it's my fault. I'm sorry, I stuck my foot out. I didn't mean to, or whatever the situation is. I mean, I'm making light of that. But in reality, you have so many people that do things to people, and the finger is always pointed at the other person and never at themselves. So that is definitely a huge thing that will drain you immediately when you are dealing with someone that is never accountable for anything. In other words, they're never wrong. They're never at fault. They're never the one that did something. And even when they do, you think they're going to take accountability for something, they're going to use something you said or did as the reason why they did it. Oh, because you did this, that's why I did it. So now when you think they're being accountable, they're deflecting the accountability back to you because they're trying to justify something that they've been backed in a corner because they've done. And then how they try to get out of that corner is blaming you for something you did to justify their actions. All right, Donnie. So, I know Jim was last, so I'm hitting you on this one.
Yes. I'm glad you brought this one up. I have dealt with this one. I've noticed that in general, those types of people are often even the first ones to assign blame. in situations. My guess is that it's a defense mechanism to avoid the criticism. But when you're in a relationship, it's not really a you versus them situation. But those people are like hyper vigilant because they don't want the blame to go to them. So they're going to make it out to be like that, like off the jump. And in my experience, what it leads to is a secondary fight that's not related to anything that just happened. Whatever your original argument was about, now it's going to be a battle of who was right or wrong, who did more damage, who did whatever. That's not a thing that's productive to discuss. And in fact, most people are willing, if just simple apologies and a solution arise from a discussion, an argument, I should say, they're willing to let it go without assigning blame. At least I've seen that. As long as you have a productive ending to your argument, there's no need to cherry pick who did what in every given part of an argument. But these people, once again, are heavy to push that, despite maybe being able to avoid it without doing it. I guess maybe there's some insecurity there, or something else that's causing this. But it's not that hard to accept responsibility for things. And in fact, it's an enriching experience to do so, because you're able to reflect upon yourself and improve as a whole. As we always say, know your dysfunction and all that.
Yes. All right, Jim, go ahead.
For those people, I turned the Monopoly people, on in Monopoly, they got a get out of jail free card and they hold on to it until they try to use it, until it's time to use it. I saw some of those people act. It could be the most minuscule of things, and they will internalize it instead of actually talking to you about it. They will internalize it for years, and then when they do something, well, here's my card, get out of jail free. And that is part of the whole thing there. It's like what Donnie says, they use other situations, but it's not recent situations. That's the problem. This is a problem from like what, year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And you're only now mentioning it when you do something wrong. It's, to me, that's like you can't have a relationship like that. This is not tit for tat, not eye for an eye competition. Who did worse? A competition. Who did worse? Who did more dirt? Who keep piling on somebody's grave? That type of thing. It shouldn't be that type of argument competition with a significant other. It's over the person you're in a relationship with. It shouldn't be like that at all. It's that type of mentality that just makes people don't I won't say don't want to do anything, but it just seems like, oh well, they're gonna do it anyway, so I might as well do it. That's how that type of mentality it snowballs to. So in that retrospect, that is very draining, because sometimes you have to walk on eggshells before they use it against you, or I think they have permission, quote unquote, to go and do something reckless. And that's not what that is entirely. That's not what it means. Well, people construe it, excuse me, to try not to take responsibility for something that did in the present. And that is something that is very counterproductive. You can't, if you don't say anything or speak up when you find out something, and you just hold on to it as an excuse for you to do something reckless and not take accountability for it. And topics could be so unrelated that they will find a way to make it related to what's going on now. And to me, that's a reach. Everybody knows it's a reach. But you know what? The problem is that it's entertained. I don't entertain that at all. I just cut it off. But it's entertained. In that type of situation, to me, and just me, it cannot be entertained. If one thing about talking to someone and be able to talk to someone freely is to be able to correct what you see is wrong, or to get a reasoning or explanation, or a standpoint that you didn't know about from the other person. That's why you should ask, instead of just using it as a tool for you to not accept responsibility for something that you do. And the whole entire thing is that I say that's unrelated, and then what Donnie said, snowball's starting to counterproductive because you're just going tit for tat on who did worse and why they did these things.
Right. So I wanted to talk about something else, another aspect of this. And this is going to sound weird. It may not make sense at first to people, but if you listen for a few seconds onto the description, then you'll get a understanding of what I'm saying here. You know what? I'm going to push this down to later on because I have something here that I think I just want to push in front of it. And another trait, another characteristic of an emotional vampire is people who lack communication skills. And that is a problem right there. And what does that mean? People who don't know how to have a conversation with you. They don't know how to, one, talk to you in a disagreement in a respectable manner, two, express how they feel, three, respond to you when you're talking to them, four, cannot speak to you in an logical fashion. They'll talk to you in emotion and not look at it from a logical perspective. So that can be very draining when you're trying to have a conversation with someone and one, they can't respond to you in what you've said, in the way that you've said to them. And then along the other lines, if it's a dispute, they may not be able to respond to you. And the only time you're going to get feedback from them is yelling, cursing, and screaming. So that can be a very big drain right there in terms of emotional vampires. And that happens so often that you'll see people, they'll try to go to the person and they'll try to explain something to them about how they feel or any type of aspect that can be of a sensitive nature. And then you get blowback from that person because they don't know how to communicate in return. And I've seen it happen so many times where people cannot respond logically, respectfully, or even in an essence of, well, I hear what you're saying, and respond in kind, in terms of, this is how I feel about what you said, and give an accurate response to even just something simple. So I wanted to put that out there. And I guess, Donnie, is your turn.
Now, I wouldn't have originally thought of that as a trait of emotional vampires. However, once you said it, it did click. I think I might have somewhat of an idea of where that stems from. What I feel it is, I think it's that whether or not they know how to communicate or not, I think it just doesn't matter to them because they're not, that doesn't benefit them. They're not there for that. Being able to communicate with you really would only help you, the other person. For them, they're just with you for whatever positive emotion or experience they find valuable, as implied by the vampire part of the title. Communicating doesn't really do anything for them because that just, it won't affect whether or not they get that resource from you. It's not a part of that, so they don't need to do it. They only need to do things that will benefit them ultimately.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
That is true.
You may have a career in therapy there.
I kind of, I think about that way. Yeah, he's right about that.
All right, Jim, you have any ingredients to add to the recipe here?
The whole communication thing is, and I'm really gonna go back to last week's and what Donnie said earlier before.
The week before,
yeah. The conversation, the topic we had the week before, with the whole argument thing, and what Donnie said, that, not every argument has to have a winner. Some of these people do believe they have to win the argument, and they will hammer home a topic, bring in topics unrelated to that topic, just to say that they won the argument. And that's not really what it should be about. To most people, it's about winning or losing in a relationship, having the upper hand, following, doing what they want because they are so-called quote unquote right in arguments when, it could be further from the truth. In all backgrounds, as she says, everybody has different experiences and things like that. And I think that in relationship, you bring those type of experiences together and see if you could do a new experiences, improve upon the ones that were good, and to re-whole adjust the experiences that you had were bad. And to me, with that whole communication thing, like Donnie said, they just don't, I do agree with it, they just don't want to communicate properly. They just want that one way for an advantage. And then, there are some people who don't know how to communicate depending upon their upbringing. But that experience should not negate to the fact that that is technically not your experience, but just an experience that you saw. And sometimes people cannot discern that type of difference. So say you weren't part of something, but you saw something and you experienced you seeing something, even though you were totally unaffected by it. Individuals will use that as their own personal experience. Like they went through that, or I saw this and I saw that, and they will internalize it and say, and act like that's the experience they went through. And it's totally, that can be totally unrelated from the truth, and they will use that as an excuse to say, oh, well, this should be this way, this should be that. And you know what, it's okay to look at it and, try to analyze it, but you cannot use that as a one-all be-all for the decision going forward, because, it's based off of somebody else. And secondly, it's, you do not know the whole entire situation that led to that. It's always in context you have to put everything into that. If you see something, you saw a moment in time related to that experience. You don't know the whole entire thing that led up to it or what happened afterwards. So that type of misappropriating what you see and versus what you experience, that could get mixed up. And a lot of individuals I see don't know how to discern themselves from those type of situations to take themselves out of it because they weren't personally involved. But right. I digest from that one. That one is could be a whole entire topic in general, but that's another issue. But that's between people who don't know how to communicate and people who don't want to communicate. And that's a really big issue. That's a really big discerning issue I never thought of. Thanks, Donnie, for that. And it's a problem. It is, but sometimes it's hard to recognize that in itself, what Donnie said, and people who don't know how to communicate and people who do, and versus people who uses that type of experiences that they're not involved with versus ones that they were. It's very hard to discern because you cannot break it down, in one type of, I won't say argument, we'll call it a disagreement. And, it's hard, it's difficult, but it's not as simple as an argument as people make it seem out to be.
Right. So getting back to the communication thing, communication is very difficult for the average person. People often speak naturally, but people are not often thoughtful about the things that they want and need to say to other people. And I think that is a big issue when you meet people, because I know in my life, I've met lots of people who can talk to you, but they can't have a conversation beyond the initial thoughts of what they were thinking of. So a lot of times people will talk to you what they know how to talk about, but not really what they need to talk about. So if you have a problem or a concern, a lot of times people don't know how to express their feelings about a specific issue that they need to talk about, but they'll tell you 1,000,001 words on the things they want to say, like whatever it is that they care about. But when it moves over to the absolute need of a conversation, that's where people struggle. So a lot of times you can hear people talk about, I don't know, spilling tea, and they can spill a tea all day long. But when it's an issue, for example, let's say in a relationship, and they had an expectation, that them explaining that expectation is very difficult when it comes to the next person. So they won't know how to have the tough conversation. And then what happens is they build up this anger and sometimes anxiety. And then when they finally are confronted with the issue, it explodes, and then they have a problem communicating, and then it turns into arguments most of the time, because most people don't know. Let's keep it real. Most people do not know how to have um any kind of conversation when it comes to appointed conversation versus like small talk. And you talk about TV and what they care about. Let's talk about things you don't care about. Let's have a conversation about that. What about what I care about? Can you talk to me about what I care about? Can you talk to me about what's happening in the world? A lot of people have a hard time talking about things that are not important to them or matter to them, because sometimes what matters to people is not necessarily important. It may feel like that, but it isn't really. So I kind of wanted to finish off there. And I wanted to have this discussion, and this is going to be a weird label for an emotional vampire, but I'm going to explain it a lot better. And that is, Jim, I know you've heard this expression before, and I want to use it in this universe. And that is called pretty rich. And that is definitely an emotional vampire. And what does pretty rich mean? So basically, in this world, and I won't just label it to women, because I'll label men as pretty rich, just so I don't have to figure out a word to call men. But in this world, well, especially in Western society, such as ours, you have people who they get over in life by their looks. So if they're beautiful or attractive, they get their way all the time. So what happens is, when they meet you, pretty rich people expect you to cater to them all the time. So they want something, they expect you to give it to them. They don't want to talk to you, they expect you not to talk to them. They want time away from you, they expect you to give them time. Whatever it is that they want. It's kind of like the Coming to America in Imani Azia, and she was like, whatever food you like. It's kind of like that. That's what they pretty rich people expect you to do. They expect you to cater to their desire. And to me, that's very draining, because a lot of times those pretty rich people will definitely try to walk all over you. And I won't say it's always intentional. Sometimes it is, but some people are just so used to getting things a certain way, they don't know how to play with others when they become adults. And I know some people like that. I have friends like that are pretty rich. And you want to fix your phone there, Jim? Because you're doing the most over there.
Yeah,
okay. You're getting me dizzy. All right. So pretty rich will be, you're trying to help somebody who's pretty rich, and then all of a sudden they just ghost you, and they're like, well, they give you excuses. Oh, I was busy. And that happened to me recently. I have a pretty rich friend, and she has this habit of needing something on her terms. So you want me to help you. You're looking for things in life, and you ask me for my assistance. But how does help come on your terms? So when you want to respond to me, you'll respond to me. When the other times, you'll ignore me. So I'm like, wait a minute. How can you want me? Time is valuable. Once you spend time, you can't get it back. So pretty rich has to understand, I'm giving you my time to help you from whatever it is that you need to get where you are struggling to go. So if you're struggling in life to get somewhere, and you have people that are supporting you, you can't be pretty rich and ignore the help that you're getting from people. But that's her. You say you're in need, you want, but the pretty rich in you is like, well, I'll get back to you when I want to. So I can send you a text message or a phone call today. You might call me tomorrow, 2 weeks from now, a month from now. So that's pretty rich, because pretty rich, they work on the outer characteristics of themselves. So people who are pretty rich, they focus on vanity, the way they look. So pretty rich people will look amazing on the outside and hardly work on the inside of themselves. While they may not be unpleasant in disposition, there's a selfishness to them in which they do not put the effort that is given to them. So if you're willing to go hard for someone who's pretty rich, whether it's a man or a woman, the pretty rich person's like, well, I'm pretty. This is what people usually do. The expectation is people fall over me. So everyone falls over me. I'm falling over no one. So that is what I call an emotional vampire, because those pretty rich people will always expect you to do something, even if they don't even require you to do it. They'll be like, well, just give it to me. You know, you want to give it to me, give it to me. If you don't give it to me, you don't give it to me. But they're not going to put the same energy in return. So that's what I mean by pretty rich. All right, Donnie. So what do you have there?
I wanted to give a warning to people watching, because I've seen this happen a lot, where people will meet this pretty rich type of person, and when they aren't fooled by the exterior initially, sometimes that pretty rich person will take interest in that in itself. They'll go, oh, this person isn't going to automatically twist to me. Well, now, and then they'll want to chase it, if you know what I mean. Not because there's any interest, but because they just want to prove that they can get that person who clearly resisted them to fall over at the side of them like everyone else. That's a thing that a lot of people will fall into by accident, because they see it initially. They'll see, oh, this is clearly just some superficial thing, and then they trick themselves into believing maybe they dug far enough to see what's below the surface, or maybe they're changing the person or whatever else. I just stress that people don't fool themselves into thinking someone like that is genuinely interested in anything with them.
Yeah, that's a good one. I've thought about that previously, not today, but during other times, and that's 100% true. And a lot of times you'll see pretty rich people, and I'll turn this over really quickly to you in a second, Jim. But you'll see pretty rich people who will, like you said, when people reject their richness, will want to validate themselves to those people. So they know they're pretty enough to get the attention, but a lot of time they do meet people who kind of know the game and know that they're pretty rich, and will reject that person because they're pretty rich. And then that person now tries to prove themselves to that person. But a lot of times the person that rejects them doesn't really care about their richness beyond whatever they want from the person. So it can be just like they just want to, if it's a man with a woman, he may just want to sleep with her. So he'll reject her richness, get her to do all the things that he wants from her, and then mistreat her because he doesn't, her richness doesn't care. He doesn't care about it. It doesn't matter to him. So he'll take advantage of that situation. So that's definitely a reality. And let me tell you, I've been in that situation, and it's very difficult to deal with when you're trying to have a meaningful relationship with someone who's pretty rich and not inner wealthy, let's just say. All right, Jim. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, that I have a few experiences with that. And the problem is that sometimes, even from my standpoint, they will get the people they have under their spell to try to convince you that it's not, in a particular way or situation, or they're not using their looks for you. It's like I don't know. It's like I had a situation like that where I wouldn't do, what a pretty rich person say, person getting behind their looks, and they get their friends to try, advocate for them, and that's like the worst thing in the world, especially if you know them too as friends. It's like, no, it's okay, stuff like that. No, it's fine, and for them, I can't explain it to them because they're trapped, they're under that type of spell with pretty rich people, and it just becomes kind of hard to explain that type of behavior because they're already entranced. You can't talk to a person who's entranced already with a pretty rich person because it's a futile point at that point. You have to snap out of that themselves, and it just becomes difficult. You don't want to enable or advocate that the only reason why you do things for people is because they look pretty. It should be from a point that, you do things because you care about a person, you respect them, things like that. And it's not because of your looks, but most of these people just are just entrapped with that. They're really trapped with that pretty rich mentality, and they think that just because you do something for a person, you like them, they look pretty, stuff like that, which is not really true. Because technically, when you do something for them, I really don't ask for anything back like that. Maybe I might be in trouble, like maybe a couple months down the road or something like that. But it's no quid pro quo, and that's what individuals like that sometimes, expect, or for in terms of a pretty rich person, is that you just do it unconditionally because they're pretty, and that's it. It's like they're using your resources and your time, your energy, and everything, and you just feel like they just don't owe you nothing because you were lucky enough for them to ask you.
Okay, yeah. Did you have
That-
something more to add? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, I'm sorry. And that type of mentality is that people don't realize. When I say they don't realize that they're being drained, they really don't. They just, they just do it because of the way the person looks, and it's like, oh God, it becomes very annoying because it distracts them. It distracts and just motivates of what they really are trying to do. So I'm not really part of the pretty rich type of thing. It's very obnoxious and audacious for a person to do and use.
Yeah, absolutely. And some people, they definitely, so I'll say you have two kind of pretty rich people. You have those who know they're pretty rich and use it purposely to take advantage of people. And then you have people who are pretty rich that maintain that beauty richness, but unintentionally take, I don't want to say take advantage, but have this level of selfishness about them because they've never worked on the inner parts of their beauty. You know how when we say there's a beauty inside out. So you have some people who, when they focus so much on the outside, they don't focus on the inside of who they are. So the second type of pretty rich, they can not be bad. They're not bad people. It's just that they've never focused on being a great person. They never focus on being beautiful on the inside, where it really matters in the long run. So you'll see I find a lot of pretty rich people always end up in the same place, and that's usually in bad relationships, because whether it's intentionally taking advantage of someone because of their looks, well, it always comes back to hurt them in the end. Many times, not often, because you have some women, I'll use, and then get married to men who have money, and then they'll take him for his money and end up with half of his stuff. But then you have the pretty rich that are not looking to take advantage of people, but because they haven't worked on the redeeming qualities on the inside, they get into relationships with people who don't care about those qualities. And then after they get with that person, the person finds out that the grass isn't green on the other side, lose interest, and then it turns into the problem for the pretty rich person. But for you, on not the pretty rich person, that you're trying to invest in someone, a lot of times we follow people based on our attraction. So guys, you find a woman that's beautiful, you're like trying to find all the pieces that makes her suitable to be in a relationship with. And that's what happens a lot of time when we meet these people. It's the initial attraction that allows us to ignore people. And when we ignore people, when people for who they are, these qualities that we talked about in terms of emotional vampire, they're present and evident, but because we're so caught up in the attractiveness of the person, we ignore those things. So we get involved with emotional vampires and invest our feelings, we invest our time, and then no one wants to waste their time. No one wants to get into a relationship and be like, oh my God, I can't believe I spent 5 years or 2 years or 4 years. And it's very hard to get out once you've emotionally invested in somebody. That one, especially guys who found these women that they thought were beautiful, that, wow, how do I even move on from here? And then, a lot of times there's superficial reasons why people don't get out of these relationships, because they don't want someone else to be with that person. I remember I was dating this woman and she had a friend that was a video director. I don't know if I talked about this on any of the shows before. So he was a dirtbag, but he was very successful and she was liked him for that. You know, he was involved in high profile celebrity music videos and stuff like that. So I remember a particular time, it was Valentine's Day, and she bought him this $500 leather jacket. And so she was so excited. She's like, oh, you know, I'm going to give him this jacket for Valentine's Day. And so she goes to give him the jacket. And do you know what his gift was for her? Some penis. He wasn't even giving her a Valentine's Day gift. But at this point now, she's so upset because I mean, this time she did fight back, but she didn't break up with him. So then she goes to tell him that she has a menstrual cycle, and he says, I can't believe that you ruined my gift that I had for you. So he was even more mad that she had a menstrual cycle and that he couldn't have sex with her. So he was like, you ruined Valentine's Day. So she was immensely hurt. She never gave him she took the leather jacket and returned it. But the moral of the story was he was a jerk. Like, she found so many things about her that he totally disregarded her. But here was the thing. So I don't know if I can't say, I don't know. I can't look at him and say if he was pretty rich or anything like that, but he was very successful and she liked that about him. So I remember when the conversation was, well, why don't you break up with him? And her response to us was that he was on the cusp of blowing up huge, being bigger than he already was. He was already somewhat successful, but she was like, I don't want to break up with him and then he blows up and now someone else gets to enjoy his wealth. So she stayed with him because of that. And those types of things happen in relationships when you emotionally invest to people who are emotional vampires, that they just constantly drain you of your emotion. And so I think the way to deal with that is definitely reflection. So got to reflect. You got to know what's wrong with you. If there's something wrong with you, and then you have to build upon that, because a lot of times the reason why we have problems functioning in terms of removing ourselves from relationships is because of our own issues. And sometimes we don't address our own issues. And therefore, when we have our own issues that are unaddressed, it's very hard to sort of stand up for ourselves and be like, I'm not tolerating this, and either allowing the situation to be rectified or moving on if the situation can't be redeemed. If you can't fix a relationship, if the person can't adjust and you can't adjust with the person, then you have to be strong enough to remove yourself from that situation. So I think that I want to talk about that because we've already talked about the characteristics. So I just want to give advice to people who are involved with these emotional vampires and give them encouragement on what they should be doing. So that's my particular advice there, or my particular direction pointing people in. So Adani and then Jim, and then we'll just kind of close this out.
Sure. I have some pretty, well, at least I think it's good advice, because I dated someone who was susceptible to this type of thing. So I got to see like the inner workings of this, but I'd say for people who are concerned about, not even that, I think just a thing you should do with your relationships in general is occasionally have a sort of check-in with yourself. Just sit down with yourself and just think about if you're gaining as much from this relationship as you're giving. I think that's one of the biggest things to consider. If you feel like all of your time and efforts are being put into something that you can't see the reciprocated efforts in, there's no point in continuing that. For some people, that's going to be a little more difficult because everybody's different. There's different circumstances and all that. To some people, I know people like this, just like the feeling of being needed. And emotional vampires will satisfy that need 100% of the time. And it's unfortunate, but they will take advantage of that kind of personality trait. I just say for those people, just to be that effort is great and it's appreciated, it's noble, but they should be careful with who they are extending that to, because in theory their partner should be willing to do the same for them no matter what, even if they don't have the same kind of personality trait.
I agree with that. Yes, that was a good point that you brought up there. And I agree with that 100%. All right, Jim, what do you have to close this out?
Yes, I'm Barack Obama, and I approve that message as well. Just kidding.
Oh, throwback there.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said it. I agree with Donnie 100%. It's hard because everybody has a different tolerance level of what they're willing to give before they reach a breaking point. So like what Donnie said, and what you said was, Jonathan, reflect and have a check-in to see, is this relationship going where you want to go? You're giving a lot, and what Donnie said, you might feel be needed, and you may used to be doing that. But at the same time, you have to emotionally see that, you are being looked after as well. And if you don't feel like you're being looked after, or you just don't see the numbers game is ending up, or the emotional game is not adding up, have a conversation with your significant other first, see where their head is at. If it's something that they don't really recognize or they didn't really think of, you might have brought something to their attention that they didn't feel like they were neglecting, because you like to be needed, like what Donnie's like to be needed, or you like doing these things. Some things can be misconstrued by the person who's giving the help, because that's in their nature. So always try to realize, like always, boys say, know your dysfunction, and then know yourself as well. Know how you are personally, how you interact with people, and depending upon what you see or how you feel, then you should act upon it. I don't think it should be, you should be able to talk with the person about it without having an argument or having that escalated. It should just be, something civil, a discussion. It's not to throw anybody any shade, or to throw like you're doing wrong. It's not to say you're doing wrong. It's just to say that, what's going on. I feel like, such and such and such, such and such and such. And also take the feedback of how the person responds. If they are receptive, but they don't realize what's going on, or you just think that was within your nature, I don't say it's acceptable, but you see from where they're coming from on why, things are like that. If they become very combative or something like that, it's it's kind of harder to deal with, because they feel like you're picking at them. And that's not the case. It's just an observation that you see that's affecting you, and you should be able to talk to the person about something, like what you said, talk to a person that's about something that's affecting you, instead of it being the other way around. Especially from people that might not be used to that. It's hard, but they have to, realize that, it is a two-way street. And if you're not used to your partner talking about themselves like that, you should be receptive to hearing out, out of the blue, even though you never heard it before, on what the issue, what the problem is, and what they might have noticed and they have ignored, and you're saying, I'm just confronting it now before it gets any further. Communication, responsiveness, and feedback is always what helps the relationship. And out of most things, when you go to somebody with receptive with a quiet disposition, or a calm disposition of what's going on, if you get back something worse, then you have to realize, know the person that you're with. If you get back something worse, it's okay. If you start yelling and screaming, you just have to help de-escalate that situation, and just say, because they're not, if they're definitely not used to you speaking up about that, it's going to create different types of friction. So
I just want to kind of finish it there, because we're pretty much out of time at this point. So I want to just thank everybody, definitely to Donnie and Jim for their assistance in all matters in front of the house. And for all of you who are tuning in, thank you for your support. Please like and subscribe if you're on YouTube, if you're on Anchor or Apple Podcast, Google, Spotify. Please subscribe and like or whatever they do on those applications. With that being said, I just want to say this was a great discussion, and we look forward to having more of these in the future. Hopefully, we can get over to live streaming, but we first got to gain steam to do that first. And with that being said, this is Jonathan St. James along with Jim and Donnie St. James, and we bid you a fair adieu.
Take care.